Okay, I forgot to hit record again, but now I'm recording. So some people are gonna miss the first part, but it's okay. Okay, so Sarah, set us up a little bit on the situation and how you actually got to need a quarantine house.
Sure. So on the 17th of April, one of our workers placed 2 young kiddos into foster care. The little boy had a fever, and so when they took him to the doctor, they went ahead and strep tested him and flu tested him, and all of that was negative. So just to kind of cover all of our bases, they went ahead and had him COVID tested. And of course the results aren't immediate at this point, so they told us it would be 24 to 48 hours before we would have any of those results. And so then, you know, obviously we came against the brick wall of finding placement for a kid with a fever during a pandemic. So we got word of the quarantine house and got approved to stay with the kiddos there. So we got there on the 17th at around like 11:45 that night. And yeah, we were there from the 17th until the next Monday afternoon.
Now, when you say you spent the entire weekend with some support from Medlink, right?
Yes.
Now, tell us, how did that come to be that you are the one from DCFS that spends a weekend there?
Well, I knew that if he did end up having a positive result and I was exposed, I didn't want to take that home. And so the worker who actually placed the hold brought it to me and was like, hey, this is the situation. I had already been around the kids at the office. And so it just seemed like a good idea for me to go ahead and be the one to do that, just to make sure, I didn't take it back to my house.
Yeah. So tell everybody a little bit about what we have titled the quarantine house. What's it like?
Sure. So it's a fully equipped housing situation. Like you said, it's one of the old emergency shelters at Methodist. It's got, I think, 4 or 5 bedrooms and 3 beds in each room. They've got, full kitchen, full laundry stuff, showers, 2 bathrooms, all of that stuff. There was no entertainment stuff there, like for the kid. I think the kids were 1 and 4. And there was nothing there to keep them entertained, but I had really good support from the Greene County office, and they packed a bag of snacks. They packed a bag of toys and coloring books and crayons, and they went and got all the clothes for us. And then one of the workers let me borrow her portable DVD player, so we had that while we were there. So we made it work, but it's a full duet.
I love that it was a team effort. And since our first placement there was just overnight and was a teenager, and you had little ones. So, we're learning every time and trying to better equip. So tell us why was it important for you to stay with the kids when it meant giving up the weekend with your family? It meant, you knew that these kids potentially were exposed to COVID. Like, why was that important? And why did you make the choice to stay that weekend?
Well, I knew it needed, obviously it needed to be done. Someone needed to do it. And like, I mentioned, I didn't want to bring it back to my husband. And we didn't want to run the risk of putting them in a foster home if we were able to find one at all, which it wasn't looking good. And then run the risk of them exposing anyone else in the house. So, sorry, I keep getting phone calls.
It's okay. I see your eyes. It's the same thing. Probably everybody's telling you, you're doing an amazing job. Keep going. So, because that's the kind of team that you have there in Greene County. Well, I just want to say thank you so much to you specifically, Sarah, for being willing to step up in that moment of crisis for those 2 little ones, and also to the Greene County team. You didn't probably know it, but I was getting pretty frequent updates that weekend, and was very worried about you, as I know your team was too. And so was Becky Dunnigan, Deputy Director, and our Assistant Director, Angie Newcomb, who were super involved. And, the quarantine house is a absolute last resort, but we know that there might be some situations where we have to use it. And I just applaud you, Sarah, for stepping up in that moment of crisis to put those kids first. And so because you did that, now this is our first time to do this, but I am giving you the GEM award, and hopefully you can see that on your screen for going the extra mile, and you will actually get a physical copy that is signed. We will somehow get that to you, but I wanted everybody to see and present that to you over at the Zoom day. So thank you so much for going the extra mile and stepping up in the time of crisis. And thanks for being willing to join me today and share. So,
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, well, hope to see and hear from you next time, but maybe not in the middle of a crisis. So thanks again, Sarah.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Okay, so moving on to our data, that was Sarah, and I hope for everybody who knows Sarah, you reach out and applaud her for her work that she did in that particular situation, and she continues to do. So next up on our list is the data. Now, because the data, it's pretty new in the month, so I'm not going to go through a lot of the visitation data on foster care and protective services, but you guys know that how I feel about it's important and how you guys feel to make those visitations a priority. Today, I really wanted to focus on the safety piece since last week we focused on permanency. So today, in talking about safety, we're again looking at timely initiations of investigations, but part of assessing safety is more than just seeing the child and initiating an investigation. Assessing safety is one of DCFS's primary goals and is a responsibility to every single one of us, whether it's me getting involved in a case, whether it's you on the front line. Every time you touch a case or have an interaction with a family, going through your mind is, how am I assessing safety? Are there red flags? Are there things that I need to be working on? And a big part of assessing safety is knowing the history of the family. And so that is something that across the state we have been weak at. Now we have some all-stars, but as across the state and looking at cases, it is a weakness of ours. And when I say looking at history, I don't just mean going in CRIS and seeing whether they're substantiated or unsubstantiated. There is a lot of information to glean from CRIS on unsubstantiated case, red flags about the families, patterns of behaviors, and all an unsubstantiated tells you is there wasn't enough evidence to prove that abuse or neglect happened for that particular allegation. But it doesn't tell you, are there red flags with that family? Does the family have protective factors? Like, what are the protective factors of the family? Is there a history of substance abuse? Maybe it wasn't to such a situation that it was child maltreatment, but it's been ongoing for 10 years and it's getting worse. And you can see that through reading the contacts. Every worker who works a case has a responsibility to do their own due diligence and look into that family. So if an investigator makes a true finding and passes a case to a protective service worker, that protective service worker can't just rely on an email or a brief update from the investigator. You have a responsibility to understand and know what's going on with that family. And I'm not talking about a specific case. These type of practice behaviors come to my attention pretty regularly. So sometimes, like just last week, I had a situation where the protective service worker said, well, it was never in the email that I got from transition from investigator to worker. No, it is the responsibility of a supervisor, a worker, to really understand what the history is and what the risk factors are related to that family. Another case where, a worker told the family, well, I'm working this case, but I don't really need to understand what previously happened because I'm focused on what's happening now. Well, while yes, you're focusing on what's happening now to understand the risk and the dynamic, you have to have looked at the history. Now, when I say history, it's more than just CRIS, it's more than just true or unsubstantiated. It's really looking into those other cases, looking at family connections, looking at risk factors. It could be also doing a LexisNexis search and knowing, not just like a huge risk factor for child abuse and neglect is domestic violence. And while you may or may not find that in CRIS, you may see criminal history related to that family in LexisNexis. Understanding how often the police are coming out to the house, what is the criminal history related to the people living in the home. Those are all critical factors to determine how to appropriately work with the family and assess safety. So LexisNexis is the key. And then our third piece, where I'm going to introduce David Meeks. understanding and knowing what the out-of-state history is. I can tell you that through child death reviews over the last couple years, there is a consistent and common theme where we have missed truly working with the family. Maybe we were making the home visits, maybe we had a case plan, maybe we were working the services, but we didn't truly understand the dynamics of the family because we didn't reach out and get that out-of-state history. So back in August of 2009, it really came to light through several child death reviews that we had to do a better job, we, Central Office DCFS, supporting the field and getting that out-of-state history, because we understand that it is complex to get the history from other states. And so what we did was we shifted around some work and made it a priority for David Meeks. And David, if you'll join me here on the Zoom, I'm going to make sure that he can join. David, can you join me? Oh, great. There's David. So one of David's main functions is to support the field with getting out-of-state history. So I invited David to join us today to tell a little bit about his experience and also how he is helping staff with this search to find history from out-of-state and why it's so important. So I'm turning it over to you, David, for a couple minutes.
Okay, thank you. Can you all hear me?
I can.
Okay, good. Well, it's been an interesting journey, but it, as Misha said, it's very, very important for us to get that complete picture, that history, because what we're finding out is that a lot of these folks are coming from other states and they have history. Some of them is very serious history. And so we want to give that caseworker, that investigator, the complete picture so that they can make the best possible decisions on how to deal with that particular family. To give you for instance, I do a lot of requests, of course, over to Oklahoma because they're a bordering state. And, many times I will get history back from Oklahoma, but in one particular case, the central office worker there had looked at the notes, had looked at the case history and said, she had very, very serious concerns about it and needed to actually talk to either the supervisor or the actual caseworker. And so we were able to, make that happen so that she could address those particular concerns. And again, it's really about the safety of the children and making sure that we have that complete history so that we can make the best decisions for the family.
Thank you so much, David, for sharing. And what I'm sharing right now to the screen, let me hit share. This is the email that came out from Leslie. It's a DCFS all. We'll send it again, but I didn't want to get into the weeds about how exactly you make this request, but we're going to send this email again, and it details how anybody across the state, investigators or differential response, can make that request, which will ultimately go to David. We did make it to a child.investigation.services@dhs.arkansas.gov. So in case David's out and there's somebody filling in for him, that there would still be the support there. So we're going to share this information again so that you can read through the specifics of how you request this support. But for this Zoom today, I just really wanted everyone to be reminded about the importance of considering history. So, I'm going to go back to the child death. I mean, maybe you're following policy and making home visits. Maybe you're following policy and you created a case plan. But if you don't understand what had been going on in the other state, or even in our own state with the prior history and how serious it was, you may have very misguided judgment about the seriousness or the ability of a parent to truly keep a child safe. And so I always encourage you guys to think about the age of the child and in factoring in safety. But for today, I wanted to focus and do a reminder on the importance of safety as we look at our initiation rates. And now, even though when I shared our initiation rates a few minutes ago, there are areas that are being true rock stars in initiation, but we are still having several areas that are struggle to initiate investigation. So I need not just the area, it's the county, it's the investigative supervisor, it's the investigator. It is everyone's responsibility to work together as a team and figure out how we keep kids safe. And safety is more than just initiating that investigation. Once investigations does their complete investigation, that in-home worker, every time you're seeing that family, you have a responsibility to really assess, is this child safe? Do I need additional services? What risk factors are present that I need to address? So not to beat a dead horse, but I cannot remind everyone enough that safety is important. David, do you have anything else to add before we move on?
No, I think that's covered it. But if anybody has any questions, feel free to email me. I'll be glad to try to answer them for you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, David. Thanks for joining me today. So, okay, I can see my question answers are quite lengthy today. And so, and maybe I just got a lot of, I can hear you. So let me scroll through. I'm going to get to question answers. Now, before I get to all the question answers, and apparently we have chat too today, which is going to make it a little bit more complicated for me. So it looks like we have chat and we have question answer going. So, so as I get to these, let me just do a brief overview of what was sent out at the at-risk, because I still feel like I'm getting some questions and some emails today that people really aren't understanding the at-risk email that went out yesterday. First, the purpose of the at-risk form is if you meet one of those categories, you are filling out a form if you are requesting to work remotely and have no face-to-face contact with clients or coworkers. If you still plan to come to the office, if you still plan to go out in public for whatever, I mean, there's no judgment, but if you're still planning to, you know, go in public to do your errands and see your friends, then it is not appropriate for you to fill out an at-risk form. But if you are saying, because of my condition, I feel like I cannot be in the office with my coworkers and I cannot have face-to-face contact with the public because I have one of those categories on the form, and that is when you fill out the form. Number two, it is completely voluntary whether you fill out the at-risk form. So if you have one of those conditions, but you are not asking to work remotely and have no contact with clients, there is no reason for you to fill out that form and disclose your condition. So if you have a condition and you don't feel like it's our business to know that you have a condition and you're going to continue to work the way you've been working, then so be it. Next, if you are working remotely, but you do not have an at-risk condition, that is still encouraged. So supervisors and local staff, you know, you are working with your area director, your county supervisor to determine staggered schedules, working remotely. Nothing has come out to push us back into the office. We are still trying to be productive, keep kids safe, and complete our work. And if that can be done remotely or with a staggered schedule, that's where we are. Continue to do that. So that just highlights some of what was in that information from yesterday. So now I'm going to see if I can get through some of these question answers. I love all the shout outs to Greene County and the support of the gym. So Kristen, what is your suggestion when we do the request and get records back stating there is no history found from the state, but we know that's not accurate? Oh, thank you for a history question. So Kristen Penner, I think that if you know that there's history, then reach back out to David Meeks. And then if we need to escalate it up the chain of our partners over at the other states, then we will do so. Like if you know that that's not accurate, then David can use his contacts. And if he can't get it straightened out, then we'll work up the chain of the other child welfare agencies. I've had good experience working with the other states. And just like sometimes you got to raise it up our chain to get answers on specific or complicated situations, we will do the same for the other states. Should we be conducting a search with LexisNexis on every referral? It's hard. I don't think that we have specific policy, but I can tell you that I think it's a good idea, but you've got to work within the resources. So if for some reason, Patricia, you go back and whoever's running LexisNexis searches says, I can't handle that volume, can y'all please raise that up the chain to the area director so as we as a state can look at if LexisNexis is a tool that you guys are using and is providing the information that you need, do we need to provide additional resources with LexisNexis? So I do think that it's a good idea to use LexisNexis on most of your cases. There might be an exception here or there based on knowing the family or the situation, but LexisNexis is a great tool that I would encourage you to utilize. I see an anonymous. On the first at-risk form, if pregnancy was at risk, is that not the case this time? So our legal team updated the at-risk form based on CDC guidelines, and the pregnancy is no longer on the list. So we are using the current form. So the answer is that is not currently an at-risk category. Again, you can work with your local supervisor and staff if you're currently working remotely to figure that out. Let's see here. Shelly, what is the average turnaround we should expect for an out-of-state search? David, if you're still on, can you jump in? Because I suspect it varies from state to state, but I'd love to hear, David, if you're still on, I'd love to hear your, oh good, there's David.
Yep.
Did you hear that question?
Yep, I heard the question. Timeline is going to vary depending upon the state. Oklahoma, for instance, I can usually get those back within a day or two of when I send them. California, it's been several months. Texas usually is about a month or two, but I've had one just come back that I sent back in September. So turnaround time is going to vary depending on state and county and how much they're backed up.
Okay, thank you. So next question, I'm just going on the list. If y'all can see the question answer, you can see that I'm just going down the list. Why are foster homes getting extra money because of the virus, but we cannot get hazardous pay for risking our safety? So the extra money for foster parents was paid because they are incurring extra expenses related. School is out, they have increased utilities, they have increased food bills. That had the extra money also even went to provisionals who aren't currently receiving a board payment. We have foster parents incurring childcare expenses. So the extra money was really meant to cover the additional cost of the kids in their home during this time. If we filled out an at-risk form the first time, do we submit another one if it is all the same? Yes. Thank you for asking that question, and I should have clarified that. It has to be submitted by close of business today. And if you submitted a form already, that is put aside. If you want to continue to be considered at risk and you meet one of the categories, you have to resubmit the form. We are trying to have a clean, everybody submit the new form and clear guidance to everybody. Question on the at-risk email. As a caregiver for an at-risk person, is it saying that caregivers should not be meeting the needs of the person they are caring for by getting groceries and self-care, as in going to the park to get away from the demands of being a caregiver? What the email is saying is, if you are continuing to go out in public, then you are putting yourself at risk. And so if you feel like you can do that outside of work, then you need to continue to do that at work. As far as groceries are concerned, yes, we understand that you have to continue, even a caregiver has to continue to get groceries, but are you making choices? And I know that the state is rural, so this does not apply to everybody. Are you making choices to, do the online grocery shopping or drive up and pick up at Walmart or Kroger versus going into the store? If going into the store is your only mechanism to get food for you and the person you're caring for, then that is going to be allowed. If you are going to the park and you're meeting groups of people, then you can come to work and have face-to-face contact with our clients as well. If you're taking a walk around the block and you are social distancing, then that's separate and apart. You're not going into public. You're walking out in the open space. Let's see here. What if we filled out previously but are not filling out this time? When should we start coming back to the office? Do we still do home visits via FaceTime if possible? Okay, so a couple questions there. We will put out some guidance probably starting tomorrow or the next day related to returning. If you didn't fill out a form, if you filled out a form but you're not filling out a form, it's not necessarily that you're going to come back completely to the office, but you will resume full function, meaning you might be working remotely some, or you might come into the office some. It just really depends on what you work out with your supervisor. FaceTime visitation is still an individual case-by-case assessment, and what I had said weeks ago still remains in place, that the majority of our visits majority of our like bio visits and home visits continue to be via video conferencing, but you should be doing an individual case-by-case assessment of whether a face-to-face is necessary to either assess safety or move a child appropriately to permanency. Okay. So I see that several people are commenting, well, workers have extra expenses with childcare and utilities. I think those rationales and reasoning are separate from hazard pay. Hazard pay, the question was about hazard pay. I'm putting myself at risk. Why am I not getting extra money for putting myself at risk? I agree that groceries are essential for anonymous report, which is also why I said that if groceries can only be obtained by going in the grocery store and you are getting, and you are a caregiver, then we will make that as exception, which is what I previously said. Angela's given a shout out, so make sure everybody read Angela Newcomb, Assistant Director of Community Services. She's given a shout out to the field, so please make sure that you're seeing that. Again, on the form sent out yesterday, it says you shouldn't go to the grocery store. Little areas do not have the same services as the big areas. I acknowledge that as well. So, and I have stated that if going in the grocery store is the only mechanism by which you can obtain groceries for you and the person you're caregiving, that would be the exception. Okay, is there a way to streamline and ensure PS and foster care teams get out-of-state records if they are requested during the investigation assessment when the case is open, especially if the cases transfers out of county? At streamline, we have to rely on the other states, but we did try and streamline by not making you all do it yourselves, that we were working with David, who has connections with the other states, so he knows who to contact, how to make that request, and how to get them. And specifically that was set up for investigators and for differential response so that we get all those records on the front end. And then once the investigator gets them, they are a part of the record that is then shared with the in-home person so that the in-home person then actually looks at them, reads them, and understands the dynamics of the family. Okay, so I am uncomfortable disclosing my medical risk conditions to my supervisor. They do have a need to know the specifics of my health or risk of someone in my family. So again, filling out the at-risk form is voluntary. If you do not want to disclose your condition, then do not fill out the at-risk form. If you fill out the at-risk form and check one of the 5 or 6 categories, you can submit that without providing details. If questions come in, there might be some follow-up, like for caregiver or for certain things. But again, you don't have to disclose your condition, but you don't fill out an at-risk form. If you want the at-risk benefit of working remotely and not having face-to-face contact, you're gonna have to disclose and send that to HR as well. And your supervisor will probably be in the know on that. So again, Mr. Bailey, or Miss Bailey, can you explain the difference between nurses being on the front lines and investigators going into homes, hospitals, shelters, and others, but we are not essential? You are being categorized as essential. For Families First, the Coronavirus Families First Act, you guys in the field, including some of the staff at central office, are being categorized as emergency responders and therefore essential. There is nothing in the law nor the requirements that everyone who is an essential worker receives hazard pay, nor across our agencies are all emergency responders or healthcare workers receiving hazard pay. That has not been approved across the agency at all. Again, I would remind you guys that we are in a significant economic downturn and facing substantial cuts in our budgets. Thankfully, we have been able to maintain all of our positions, but that is difficult under the financial situation that we are under. I'm not going to take legal questions. Let's see. I'm sorry, I'm just reading through. Okay, what if you are working on an in-home case and it comes up after the investigation? Can the in-home worker request out of state? Absolutely. So just get with David Meeks and fill out that form. We are very committed to making sure that you guys have the history and have the information you need to appropriately assess safety. So just because the investigator didn't do it doesn't mean that we're not going to support the in-home workers with trying to get that out-of-state information. Our priority and top concern, whether here or out in the field, should be what are we doing to keep these kids safe? I think another example of that is just because maybe investigator didn't remove and missed a huge piece of assessing the safety, if the in-home worker gets it and that child is in immediate danger, that in-home worker has to work with their supervisor to make the decision to keep that child safe and remove that child, even if that means it's going to be exposed that we didn't do our job on the investigation side. Or maybe we did our job on the investigative side, but the circumstances changed on in-homes. Okay, so I know we are way over time. I'm going to have to copy and paste some of these questions and get back to you guys. Let's see here. I'm just going to check chat one more time because I think there's some questions in the chat. Just make sure that I didn't miss anything substantial. So I'm going to take another at-risk question. At this point, we are not requesting a doctor's note related to filling out the form. You just need to fill out the form and check the category that applies to you. Crystal, if we complete the form, will we still continue to receive pay? You're going to continue to work. Just because you're at risk does not mean that you are not working. There have been some limited exceptions for director's office leave, essentially, but our plan would be, how do we make sure that you continue to work and work remotely? Okay, so, okay. I'm going to copy and paste all of these questions. I'm going to copy and paste all these questions, and then we're going to do some follow-up. If you did not ask anonymously, we will probably just do some follow-up with the person who asked. If you ask anonymously, if I receive multiple questions that are related, then I will put out that information to everybody. And so thank you guys again for joining me today, and I look forward to next week's. If you have additional information or questions about at-risk, you can continue to send those to Stacy Miller, who is our HR liaison. And if she does not have the answers, she will get with me or Angela Newcomb. So thank you guys for all that you do. And I'm going to end with how I always end, which is, please remember, every child deserves a safe, stable family every day. Thank you guys for everything you do. See you next week.